Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, the government and political correspondent. And it is election season, and we've got November 3rd, about 8 weeks away. And so we have as our guest a candidate for the 29th Assembly District, John Calabrese. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jamie. Nice to see you again.
And I did pronounce the name right?
Yes, you did perfectly. Calabrese.
Okay. All right. Well, it's been 3 years since I interviewed you, and I guess we could talk a little bit about your prior forays into politics. But why don't you talk a little bit about your background, and if you want to include the prior runs, so be it.
Sure. Well, I was born in Rochester, New York in 1976. And I'm in the Midwest now because of my wife, who's from Black River Falls, Wisconsin. And I am a woodworker and a carpenter. And I was raised in a conservative family, and then went out on my own, and I traveled a little bit and worked in the trades here and there, and did a lot of reading and sort of changed my well, I'm not to say that I was a deeply conservative person. It was just my family and their background. And so I learned a little bit more about life, and my views have definitely strayed from theirs. But I still get along with them and talk to my mother.
Okay.
Plenty. And so now I live in Menominee, Wisconsin, and with my wife and 2 kids. And I have a woodworking shop right here on the property. And I started to get involved with politics out of a concern for the climate and other issues that I saw, and I tried to figure out the best way to manage my time if I wanted to help out in any way. And what I started to see with every issue that concerned me was corruption and the money that was flowing into politics. And so I decided to join a volunteer group in about 2013 that was attempting to get money out of politics in a general sense. And I joined them when I was over here in Wisconsin. And after a couple of years, I became the state director. And the group was called Wolf Pack. It doesn't have anything to do with wolves. It's just a catchy name. And our goal was to get a resolution passed through the majority of state houses in the country. And so I was the state director in Wisconsin, and I learned a lot by having conversations with people at the State House, with lawmakers, and about the whole process of how a resolution or a bill gets through the State House. And I had several conversations. My team and I would go to Madison a couple times a year and meet with lawmakers, and we got a resolution introduced a couple times, and it didn't really go anywhere, but it was really fascinating and fun for me, and I learned a lot. And then in 2017, there was a special election in Senate District 10, and that's when I first met you in the interview. And I decided to run because it was a downtime for me. We were a little bit in flux for my family. We might have had to move for some situations about where we were, and I didn't know exactly what the future held. And I saw who the Republicans were running, and he was someone that I'd become familiar with in my work with the volunteer group, and I desperately didn't want him to be my state senator. And so I looked into what it took to run in a very truncated, short special election, and it took 400 signatures in about 10 days, and somehow I managed to get that, and I got on the ballot. And so that was late in 2017. It was December. And I lost in the primary to my now friend, Senator Patty Shockner. But it was exhilarating. And at that time of year, and I had a good team together. It came together pretty quick. The assembly run was coming up in 2018. And so I had the idea, and some other people approached me, then why not just keep it going for an assembly run? And so I gave that a shot in 2018. We decided to move from northwest Dunn County and Tiffany Township to the county seat in Menominee in Dunn County. And I ran for state assembly, and we lost by about 2,100 votes to my now assemblyman, Rob Staffsholt. But again, I really enjoyed it. More than I thought I would. And now it's an open seat, so we're going to give it one more shot and see what happens.
All right. So you mentioned earlier your motivation for getting into politics in the very first place, but what motivates you to now make this a third run in essentially 3 years?
Well, it's an interesting district, and I have the name recognition from last time, and now that it's an open seat, I'm more motivated than ever, because I also, in the meantime, which I didn't mention, I'm now on the Dunn County Board of Supervisors, and I've come to realize that there are people who are driven just to serve and driven just to help people. And on the county board, it's funny, we have 29 county board seats, and not a single one was contested in the April election this year. But what I've seen when I've been on that board now and met all my fellow board members, I see something really similar in their demeanor and in their eyes and in the way that they carry themselves. There are people who really want to help their neighbors and who really want to make the government and the services that we all rely on work as efficiently and as well as possible. And I'm one of those people. And I don't know if it's because I was raised conservative and now I'm more liberal leaning, you might say, but I am under no pretenses that everyone is ever not going to get everybody to agree with me, because that's not the point. But I would like government to function as well as it can, and I really want to help my neighbors. And what I see in government now at the national level and at the state level, not so much, at least in Dunn County, I see a lot of good stuff happening there. I see the hyper-partisanship that we all know, anybody who follows politics, and I see a division, and I hate to see it, but our neighbors are sort of battling with each other, and I want to remedy that with really what might seem like boring government. I just want to try to use the tax dollars as best as we can and do what's best for my neighbors. It's something that really drives me and makes me very happy to think about just serving the people in a proper way.
Well, and I certainly can appreciate that, having run for the Assembly, almost 3 decades ago, but something that, you have a desire to want to help. Now, with that and wanting to be a mouthpiece and listening to your neighbors there, what are you hearing as issues that you think you need to be pushing once you're elected? What do you want to make your focus? Because certainly there's a whole panoply of issues that you could deal with in the legislature, but what would be your focus?
Mm-hmm. It's hard to remember in this year of 2020 what it was that got you into it, because it's been such a fascinating year with the pandemic. But at the same time, even a global pandemic has shown how partisan things are. And so my main focus would be to just bring real, independent, on the ground, local representation. And what I've seen in this district and in a lot of districts, and I think what was really beneficial to the volunteer work I did was that it did not just focus on my own legislator. It focused on legislators all across the state. And so I could see a similarity in the parties. The Republican Party has been in control ever since I've been in Wisconsin. So, they had that upper hand. But it's similar with the Democrats too, in that, and that's just the party structure. It's not necessarily nefarious, but it's a top-down thing. And leadership says this, and usually the lawmakers follow along. And so in the 29th district, since I can remember, every vote, if not every vote, then 99% of the votes go right along with party leadership. And what I want to do is just offer an open mind. I want to bring my neighbors with me, and I want to do what's best for the people in this district. And of course, what a state assembly person does also may have to be what's best for the state, but local, real, full-time representation that focuses on the concerns of the people of the 29th district and the issues in the 29th district. And I wholeheartedly believe that if my neighbors, conservative, liberal, and everywhere in between, saw someone just honestly listening to them and doing what they thought was best, pointing out anything that I saw detrimental to the district, whether it was from the Republicans or the Democrats, that people might realize this is someone who's it's not an independent minded because you don't want to deal with the parties. It's just breaking away from that structure to do what representation was supposed to be at the beginning, which is your neighbors pick you, you listen to what they have to say, you bring that to the State House. And yes, you listen to your caucus, you listen to your leadership, but at the same time, you are the 29th district. Or I would be the 29th district, and that should come first. And so what drives me is being truthful to the people here about what's going on in Madison and taking their concerns, whatever they may be, whether it's clean water, education. A lot of small farms in Dunn County have been failing, as they have been all across the state. And I see on the county board that the budget is really strangled by a lot of state mandates and levy limit laws, and just to try to first and foremost relay that to the people. I want to tell them why they have a new wheel tax and why their property taxes are going up. And then I want to introduce legislation to fix that, to bring back local control to the community, the very diverse communities all across Wisconsin.
All right, very good. So that's your number one. What are your other areas of specific issues, whether it's education, healthcare, environment?
I think
justice issues, whatever the...
From my background in money and politics, I have done a lot of research on what happened in 2011 with a lot of campaign finance laws that were changed at the state level. And so I would like to change those back. I would like, if I'm elected in November, you have a solid 2+ months to put something together. And I think it would be really exhilarating and fun to have a few packages of bills, or at least ideas of bills to send around for co-sponsorship. In 2011, they changed a lot of campaign finance laws in the wake of Citizens United. Most notably, in my view, is one that allows the campaign committees of each chamber and each party to raise unlimited funds and then give those funds to candidates. So if you talk to a candidate, they'll say, I can only raise $1,000 from an individual, so that's not going to corrupt me. However, if you look at the filings, you'll see on the Republican side, especially, and I look at those the most because that's who I run against, $100 from your neighbor here, $50 from your neighbor here, $28,000 from the Republican Party of Wisconsin. And that's because those Republican committees and the Democrat committees can raise unlimited funds and then donate it. So I would like to introduce legislation to reverse those. That's an issue for me that I think sort of affects all issues. I think clean water is incredibly important. Here in Menominee, we live on the banks of Lake Menomin, which is at the bottom of the Red Cedar watershed and is incredibly contaminated with algae blooms. And I know that Speaker Voss put together the Speaker's Task Force on Water Quality on the last session, but there was nothing passed and no legislation came through that. And I know that farmers are concerned. They don't just want to destroy their land. I've talked to plenty of farmers who want to preserve their land. They want to do the best practices. And to have that go forward without the influence of big farms and of the multinational corporations who push the CAFOs and things like that, I would like to really work diligently for clean water. And healthcare is another thing. Here in Dunn County, we have the Neighbors of Dunn County Nursing Home, which is one of the gold star focal points of the whole county. They really do a wonderful job. They're at the top of all the ratings for nursing facilities. But that one and all the other ones across the state are threatened with closing and with cuts and setbacks due to the failure to take the Medicaid expansion. And so I think we need to take that immediately. And what I see from the Democrats in Madison is, and I don't know if it comes from a decade of just holding the line all the time instead of stepping in front of the line and offering new solutions, but I just don't think, and not to be too critical, but I don't think that they are loud enough. And I think if people understood, if my neighbors from left to right understood what it means to accept that Medicaid expansion, that it's not just, as the Republicans say, giving a handout to more people to be on the government dime. What it is it's about the Medicaid reimbursement fund that helps those hospitals and nursing homes stay open. And the money is there, and we need to take it. And I just would really love to get loud about that issue as well. And now with COVID-19, I think a general sense of, instead of pretending or thinking that we can get back to normal, which is what you hear a lot of, it's what you sense from a lot of people who want to open the schools, who want to, get back to having county fairs and all the other things that involve large gatherings of people. In my mind, it changes from back to normal to turn the corner. And with all the small farms closing, with all the empty main streets in the small towns that we drive through, we have this golden opportunity, even though it seems dire with a lot of death and unemployment and stressed out budgets. We have an opportunity to offer new solutions for these systems, for local food systems, for education. And if we could get past the partisanship, which I think is driven by the money in politics and the donors, then we could bring people together and offer solutions without a Republican or a Democrat name hanging in the background. And I really see that it could be an exciting time and a hopeful time for people, and build confidence in people instead of a fear about not being able to get back to normal.
Okay. In that answer, and previously you talked about, having worked on the Dunn County Board. So that is a nonpartisan position, correct?
That's right.
And so you've seen the ability of people to get together behind issues that aren't necessarily dictated by a partisan platform.
That's right. And it's really heartening, and it's fascinating because that, as you know, that's the next step down from state government. And to see the people who come from all across this county, and I know many of them are Republicans and are conservatives, I should say, first and foremost, fiscally conservative, many farmers from rural Dunn County. What I see that I don't see at the state level or at the national level is listening. And you can see it when we all gathered, and now when we do it on the Zoom calls. There have been a couple times recently where we continued the state of emergency in Dunn County that was implemented right at the beginning of COVID. There were people who admittedly on that call came into the meeting thinking that they were going to vote to end the state of emergency. But our Health and Human Services Director came on, they showed charts. The county manager came on and relayed some facts. People shared things that they had read and that they knew. And I could see people's eyes, and I watched them and listened to them in statements during the debate. And they said, I changed my mind. And you just don't see that at the state level, and you don't see it at the national level. And there are many reasons for that. But it's very heartening to see people who know they have to balance the budget. They know they have to plow the roads. They know they have to run the county jail and the police force, and they just have to figure out the best way to do it for their neighbors. And if we could bring that to the state level, that's my main goal.
All right. And you also talked about maybe introduce some new ways of thinking and try to get coalitions that aren't just along partisan lines. How about when it comes to funding our K-12 education? Is that something that you would be, they tried a blue ribbon task force over the last session of the legislature, and it ended up, had a few recommendations, but then ended up adopting nothing. And so there's no pending legislation to change anything. But one resolution that our school board, proposed, looking into was a half penny tax that would go to school districts for, structures and for the physical plant. and so that they wouldn't have to use property tax dollars to fund those type of things and could focus on curriculum and, actual boots on the ground spending for students. What would your viewpoint be on, trying to alter the way that we have been funding our public education?
Was that a half cent sales tax?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, there have been many referenda all across the state, and most of them pass because people, whether they have kids in school or not, they understand the importance of the public school. A lot of towns in Wisconsin have the high school mascot up on their water tower or whatever, and it's really important to the school and to the community and to the downtown, and people know that. And that's why those referendas pass all the time. And what I would like to address first, and again through education to the voters and to help people understand how it works, is to curtail, if not completely remove, the voucher program. And I don't think that private schools are bad. I don't think they're wrong. I think religious schools should exist and people should be able to send their kids there. But if you get into the details of how the voucher programs are funded and how many people's tax dollars go to them, even in areas where they don't have school choice at all, there is no choice, then it becomes sort of a scandal when you look at those numbers. And so I would first and foremost address that, if not remove the school choice that keeps being pushed, that keeps siphoning dollars out of public schools. And then, yes, I would definitely be in favor of other avenues to raise revenue for those schools. On the county board, once again, I've learned how difficult it is for counties to raise revenue and how many state mandates there are for things that counties are mandated to pay for. And it's also very difficult to raise the levy. And for schools, too, they must put a referendum on the ballot. But I would be more than in favor of a cent tax or whatever needs to happen for the school. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think most of my neighbors would be as well. And I hate to see what has happened with demonization of school teachers and administrators and staff across the state. And you continue to see it in COVID time. I saw several lawmakers in the late spring, even, if not the early summer and beyond, and a lot of the influencers in Madison too, suggesting, if not outright saying, about the lazy teachers who have had a break since they went home early in the spring, and now they're panicking about going back to school, and wouldn't it be nice to have that job? And it's awful to see. And I think if we put those potential solutions forward, I think we would find a vast majority of our neighbors in favor of that.
We see some candidates, I see some candidates in this position I am, where I interview people that run for office, and over the course of more than a decade of doing these interviews, and people want to say that they're for small business and they're for economic development, and then they don't talk about healthcare and education and broadband. And what would you say to those folks? Just because you're running with a D behind your name, are you against economic development and small business?
Not at all. I have a small business. I run a small business, and I'm not against economic development. I think that it's not necessarily right that county budgets are tied to net new construction in terms of how they raise the levy. And I think most importantly, and when it comes to the business community in Wisconsin, I have, as we do these days, developed hashtags on Twitter and social media that hasn't quite caught on as much as I would like, but it has caught the ire of certain people in Madison, and that is hashtag abolish Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, abolish WMC. And what I mean by that is not that we have no chamber of commerce in the state. Of course we should. But I would like that Chamber of Commerce, especially in Madison, with the largest influence on our legislature, to not be a corrupting arm of the Republican Party, and that's what they are. If you look at most news articles that come out about most business changes or laws that are introduced, they quote the lawmaker who introduces it, maybe someone from the other party, and then Scott Manley from the Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, or Lucas Beber from the Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce. They almost appear to be an arm of our state government, and they funnel tens of thousands and over a decade, millions of dollars into slanderous ads against candidates and into the coffers of the Republican Party mainly. And when you have that much, and what they do and what they get out of that are laws that despite how Republicans claim to be the party of local control, they have removed local control in a myriad of ways over the last decade, and it is largely spearheaded by the Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce. And so I think if we, and there are ways to do it, if we can lessen their influence on our legislature, then we can have a Chamber of Commerce that actually works for small business and big business and all business at the same time. And like I mentioned before about the local solutions, we get, the legislature doles out in through the WEDC and other avenues, grants, subsidies, and tax credits to all sorts of companies and individuals who just so happen to be large donors to both parties. And mainly the Republicans now because they're in charge, but the Democrats play the game a little bit too. And if we could, I have this dream or this vision of standing there in Madison, having a little press conference, even if it's got to be out on the steps, and showing a chart of how much money, how many tax dollars we give away to all these companies who happen to be big donors. And if we took that money and funneled it into downtowns, and it wouldn't be easy. You can't just throw money at a downtown in Glenwood City or Baldwin and see what happens. But that's the work of a lawmaker. That's the work of the legislature, is to figure out ways to rejuvenate our communities and rejuvenate our towns. And it starts with small businesses. If we can give massive tax breaks to big companies and big corporations, then we can help out small business, small corporations. When they talk about raising the minimum wage, small businesses panic, and I understand that. If you have to pay your employee, you're paying them, $7.50, and all of a sudden you have to pay them $12, you could be ruined. And so instead of subsidizing, Quick Trip or Menards or these large companies that don't need it, take that money and work out a plan to help out the small businesses and envision that small town, envision what it looks like, and then how the farms come up from there, and then the public school comes up from there. And there are many ways to do it. And I'm thankful for my background that it comes from money in politics, because I see that the money is there and people give of their tax dollars. And I just feel like it goes a lot to the wrong places. And there are ways that if we get to work that we can help small businesses too.
Okay. Before I give you a free plug for your different social media sites or website or whatever, I have one last question. And that is, how are you campaigning in this day of COVID, where the traditional, boots on the ground or tennis shoes and out there knocking on doors is fairly considered to be taboo, a little intrusive to people now in their personal spaces and social distancing and everything. So how are you able to get your message out to voters compared to, say, 3 years ago in the primary for the Senate, or 2 years ago even as an Assembly candidate?
Well, I've been doing a lot of hanging flyers on people's doors, and which makes a little bit quicker work. But for someone like me who really enjoys this, it makes me a little sad because I love talking to people. So I've been doing a lot of that when I can, hanging flyers on doors. And we're also using a platform like this as well, and trying to reach out to people who helped us out last time and seeing if they can get on a Zoom platform like this and invite 5 or 6 of their friends and ask them to invite 5 or 6 of their friends, and try to fill up each evening with a meeting with people so that they can hear me talk. And then there's the social media, which also provides some space for advertisements that you can do, and then letters to the editors and interviews like this. But it's definitely more difficult, and I've had a couple of outdoor gathering rally things which have been decent. It's a really interesting year because, like you say, it's a little taboo to get together, but people still really do want to get together. And, I guess the equalizer is that everybody's pretty much in the same boat. And so you have to make do with what you have, and we're trying our best to do that.
Very good. Well, on that note, you talk about virtual platforms and media. What are your websites? How can people learn more about John Calabrese, and or if, based on what they've heard in this interview, they like what they hear and they want to donate, what would be a place where they could go to do that?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Calabrese4wisconsin.com is my website, and on there you can find links to my Facebook and my Instagram and Twitter, and a place to donate as well. And I'm sure on this interview you'll have how to spell that Southern Italian name, so people can see
Calabrese and then the number 4, or is it FOR?
It's FOR. Calabrese4wisconsin.com. Yeah.
All spelled out. Very good. Well, with that, hope folks learned a little bit more about your candidacy. I wish you well in the coming 2 months, and good luck with your further campaigning. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, sir. It's good to see you again.
And I want to thank our viewers for watching another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. We want you to stay informed and make sure you get out there and vote and request those absentee ballots. Thanks for watching another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal.